prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
In 2009, America inaugurated its first black president. Democrats were in power in the House and Senate, and African Americans chaired multiple powerful committees. It was looking to be a good year for the Congressional Black Caucus. But then, a series of ethics scandals engulfed some of the caucus's most senior members. It was an all-too-familiar tale in Washington. Elected officials, at the height of their power, forced to answer charges of misconduct. How did it come to this? In its early years, the CBC's mission was to build upon the gains of the civil rights movement.
Well, when we first started out, we were thinking about what do you do about Mississippi, and here's a problem in Alabama, and we were domestic.
CBC played a major role with other members to extend or renew the Voting Rights Act.
Over the years, the caucus also worked to establish a Martin Luther King national holiday, and its members heavily criticized apartheid in South Africa. As the caucus grew, it struggled to define its membership. Would the largely Democratic organization accept black Republican members? What about whites who represented black interests?
We made it clear that it was the Black Caucus, and eventually there was so much agitation for joining that after several years we set up an associate membership program.
Any African American can join the CBC. I mean, you know, we don't do a blood test. You don't have to fill out any papers. You don't, have to like NBA basketball. I mean, it's just, if you're black, you join.
But in the CBC's history, only 2 of the 6 black Republicans chose to join the caucus. Perhaps the CBC's most profound changes were geographic. Over its first 20 years, CBC members hailed mostly from northern and western urban districts. That all changed in the early 1990s.
Word came down in the early 1990s from the Justice Department that in those states that were covered by the Voting Rights Act, if it were possible to draw congressional districts that would be a majority minority, you had to do so.
The 1992 election saw a wave of newly elected African Americans from the rural South.
We increased the size of the Congressional Black Caucus by about 40%.
Over the next 20 years, the caucus would grow even stronger in influence. When Democrats won the House in 2006, a record 5 black members became chairs of key committees. The CBC's backing was crucial for winning Democratic leadership positions.
Nancy Pelosi, when she was first moving up the leadership ladder, for example, did a great deal to nurture support from the Congressional Black Caucus.
Their perspective is very important, and their participation in a leadership race, I think, is very important. I'm very fortunate that in just about every one of my races for leadership posts, I've enjoyed the support of the significant majority of the Congressional Black Caucus.
With Democrats in power, the House Ethics Committee began investigating the actions of several senior CBC members.
You end up with dozens of members being in a trip, all under investigation at once. You end up with a half dozen members individually being investigated for anything from small violations of improperly reporting a trip to large violations of failing to report hundreds of thousands of dollars of income.
In addition, the CBC has a network of affiliated nonprofit organizations, such as the CBC Foundation. These nonprofits host lavish fundraisers bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars each year from corporate donors.
It's not clear there's quid pro quo, it's not clear there's any illegal dealings, but suddenly you are magnifying dramatically the amount of money that companies can give in honor of a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, much more than they'd be able to just give to the campaign. And that's where some of the ethics questions begin to arise.
CBC members say they have been unfairly targeted.
What is it that we have done as a foundation that has not been done by the Democratic National Committee, the Republican National Committee, the Democratic Campaign Committee in the Congress and the Republican Democrat in the Senate.
None of it comes anywhere near what other people have been accused of, the Abramoffs of the world and what are some of these other people who it's a totally different thing.
I don't think that African Americans are being targeted. I think that there are very few of us who get ethics charges out of 43, but because we are a caucus and we all are the same color, it draws attention.
Ethics watchdogs agree that color is irrelevant. They say it's lack of accountability that can lead to corruption.
The CBC members generally win with a great majority, and they don't have very serious challengers, and so they don't have a lot of accountability. Their constituents back home don't seem to focus on that a great deal, as you can see, for example, in the fact that Rangel was returned to Congress and Maxine Waters had been returned to Congress.
This budget is extremely important because it is a photo of the people of the United States led by the President and the United States Congress.
In 2011, the CBC is once again at a crossroads. The caucus continues to advocate for minorities and the poor. It has criticized cuts to social programs in Republican budget proposals. But with Democrats in the minority, the caucus's power has become more symbolic than legislative. And a black president has some wondering if the CBC is still relevant in a post-racial America. What will become of the CBC in another 40 years is anyone's guess.
Another 40 years, there may not be a CBC.
I just cannot wrap my mind around 40 years from now.
The struggle for human rights and civil rights and dignity and for working people doesn't begin or end with any one president. And so I think that the CBC is actually even more relevant now.
I see where members are saying, once upon a time, the blacks had their own organization here, because they felt this country had not been fair to them, and they would meet together. And prior to that, their ancestors was brought from a foreign country, like animals, like chattel. And once upon a time, white Americans actually owned these people and sold them and took their history and shredded it and threw it away. But now all of that is over.
If we are around 40 years from today, then we have failed miserably.